Good morning, families and students. Welcome. This is a recording of a previous Parent Academy forum session that we had about understanding data and some of the key data points that we look at in terms of graduation progress and being on track. And so we're going to post both the English slides and the translated Spanish slides below as well. And just know that we'll be working on putting out a Spanish version for this, but you can use the directions for the captions below. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I know everybody is super busy. So first, we're going to be going over sort of an overview of our whole internal assessments and how we view assessments as WCPA. Then we'll focus on the NWEA MAP testing, which you get reports throughout the year. Then we'll talk about ANET benchmark assessments. And then we'll talk a little bit about GPA and credits to help you better understand student transcripts and what that means for college readiness. So let's jump in first. Let's talk about our academic data overview with our internal assessment focus. So what exactly is our assessment plan? So first, in this box on the left, I look at it as our internal assessments. And these are the assessments that teachers are creating, that, the curricula that we've purchased. We're pulling questions, we're pulling quizzes, we're pulling tests from that purchased curricula, and these are happening daily and weekly. Now, that assessment happens throughout the entire school year, and multiple times throughout the school year, we also have these external benchmarks, which are bigger, longer checks of understanding for mastery and growth. Now, we here at WCPA High School use two different benchmarks to help us. We use the NWEA MAP assessment, which we will talk about today, and we use Achievement Network, the ANET assessment, for our other benchmark because they give us two different data points on your student. And then finally, closer to the end of the year, we have our CAST testing, which is we have our SBAC interim happening in February or March. We have the formal SBAC, which happens across those other subjects. And then we also have our summative LPAC, which is a part of that state testing. And we have a separate session for that one as well. So why is this our plan? So first off, we prioritize reading and math in our benchmarks and our other external assessments because they are central to all subjects. Having fluency and understanding numbers and understanding and being able to read, listen, speak, all of these things are central to being in history, to being art, to being in those things. So we leverage our focus on those to provide more success in all subjects. As you notice, we have a mix of internal and external assessments, right? And they all go together. And so while students might take them from left to right, we plan from right to left. So we look at these assessments and we look at these assessments, and then we say, what do we need to do in our own assessments, in our own questioning to help drive success to those points for all students? Now, our internal assessments are smaller checks, which are going to tell if the student is learning in that course with that specific teacher. It might be around a specific book that they've read. It might be around a specific set of questions that they've gone over together. But it is primarily around assessing how the student is doing within that specific course with that specific teacher. Now, external benchmarks are all about telling us how well the student is growing on their own and how well they can transfer what they're doing for those internal assessments to essentially some things they have not seen before, and how are they going to approach those individual issues. And then we see how they're doing compared to their peers, either by age or grade level. And then finally, that state testing at the end of the year tells us the readiness and mastery for students to progress to the next course in their sequence and how ready they are to take on college courses. So some things to know as a parent before we get started. Different tests measure different things, even in the same subject. If you're like me and you have looked at every assessment out there for English courses, there are thousands, and they all measure something a little bit differently, which is why there are so many different versions. So for us, the NWEA MAP assessment does not measure things the same as our ANET benchmark does in reading. Also, sometimes the same score on an external assessment might actually indicate growth or some loss, depending on how the rest of the cohort is doing, how the rest of the class is doing, and how other students that age are doing as well. And everything can impact assessment scores if we let it. And, even with my daughter who's in elementary, after I see her scores, I ask her first, like, well, how did you sleep the night before? What did you eat for breakfast? How did you get pumped up and ready to take the test? All of those things matter. And so likewise, those are all positive factors, but there are many things happening right now that can negatively impact student scores if we let it, right? If we look at things such as, being absent, to having any events in the family that are causing stress, all of those things can impact student scores if we let it. And finally, just as a reminder, all students grow and learn amongst various rates. And so what I want to just say that is, don't be so alarmed at this one score, but look at the score and say, well, what can we do to move forward a little bit? And I can promise you that as we start moving forward a little bit, we're going to start moving forward even faster. All right, so I've been thinking about this in terms of our region of how I look at these. So when I'm thinking about our assessments, and primarily our two larger assessments with NWEA and ANET, I think about how I look at those a little bit differently. So if we're out in the pistachio field, there are times where you're going to go up to a single tree and you're going to look at that single tree, right? And so when I'm looking at that single tree, I might say, well, how big was it the last time we looked at it? How big is it this time we looked at it? What resources were given? What resources didn't it get? And then we think about, do we need to change any of those resources? And if we're seeing that the output from that tree is dropping, we're going to start determining what interventions are needed so that we can continue its growth and continue its production. And then we also have to balance, like, if we intervene, will certain interventions produce more growth, or could they actually hurt the growth? Those are conversations we might have around the single tree. Now, if we look at the whole field of pistachio trees, right, we're going to think about, like, well, where should all the trees be right now? Like, even in this picture, we see some different varying rates of growth and size happening. All right, so we think, well, where should all trees be right now based upon when the field was planted? If they are different, we start to think about why. Why are they different? And also we're going to look at, where have all of our trees throughout history, where have they grown at this point? After 3 years, where should they be? What should they be producing? What should they look like? And then, finally, we're going to look at, like, well, how effective are our growers and those resources for all trees in this one area? And that's going to allow us to reconfigure any resources or interventions to make it and yield stronger results. So that connects me to the map. As you will see that I look at the single tree and the field as representations for these, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's jump into the NWEA MAP assessment. Now, the MAP assessment, very basic, is a computer adaptive test, which means as your child answers questions, it'll change what the next question is. This type of assessment is primarily used because it can challenge top performing students who get several in a row correct, without overwhelming students who are below and could get frustrated by getting several wrong in a row, which we see with some of the other assessments. So looking at this graph, you can first see that going up would be a question, and each of these circles is a question. So going up increases the level of difficulty, and going down would reduce the grade level difficulty. So let's think about this student here as a 10th grade student. So they get their first question on grade level in 10th grade. Let's first say that this student gets that one right, and then the next question pops up. Let's say that that 10th grader gets that question correct. They now might be bumped up to an 11th grade question. So they get 1 correct, 2 correct. So they got 2 correct on 11th grade. So now maybe they're getting more of a 12th grade level question. And then that end of 12th grade level question they get wrong. So now it goes back to maybe halfway through the 12th grade year and they get that one right. So now it's going to bump up and say again, maybe let's give them something more difficult. Maybe this was a one-off miss here. And so that student, even though they're a 10th grader, is going to get those experiences of more difficult questions until they finish. But let's go back and try that again. If this is a 10th grade student, they answer the 10th grade question correct, and then they get to their next question, they get it wrong, they might come down here and be dropped down to a 9th grade question. Well, they get that right. Let's go back up and let's try halfway through the 9th grade year. They got that one wrong. So let's drop it down and maybe go end of 8th grade year. And so you can see how each of their answers changes the type of test that they take. So our students do not all take the same questions on the MAP assessment. This is going to tell us how they're growing, the rate of their growth, and the expected rate we can think about for future years. So the NWA MAP assessment, you're going to get a score for RIT. And while this sounds and looks complicated, we can break it down to be much easier. So students get a singular score called the RIT score in each area that they test. For us, it is reading and math are the two that we use. Now, this score represents their achievement. So it is their score on the test at any given moment, which is going to help us understand their growth over time. Now, what's interesting is the RIT scale is a stable scale, meaning that the numbers don't change based upon what grade you are in by any means. The only thing that changes is the student score. So that means our friends in kindergarten are on the same score scale as our 11th grade students. Obviously, they shouldn't be getting the same score on them, but they are all judged against the same amount. So I think about this, like, what does that mean for me? Is I think about that sort of like looking at marking height and growth on a chart. Like as a child is going up, we put them on the wall and we go, all right, you're 3 feet 4 inches, and we put that little line right there, right? That the ruler, the measurement doesn't change whenever that kid is now 10 and is at 4 feet 10 inches. The number stays the same, okay? But we don't expect a 3-year-old to be at 5 feet because that would obviously indicate some changes or differences. So we think about the same thing with the single pistachio tree, right? We look at the pistachio tree and we say, how tall is it? How many pistachios are it putting out? How many branches are there? We could look at so many different things, and they help us understand those. So let's take a look at what this means again to be a stable scale, because I know that's probably the most confusing piece of the element. So we can see here that kindergarten through 12th grade, and then here is sort of the RIT scale, right? And so we can see that, let's picture that we have a 5th grade student here who is, let's say, right around 170. And then next we have a 6th grader who is like close to getting to that 180 mark. And then all the way over here, we have a 9th grader who is above the 180 mark. But their scale is all the same, okay? But the idea is that there should be more students above this line if they are doing well on those. All right, so next, that's the RIT score, but another score you're going to get that's super important are percentiles. Now, percentile ranks indicate how well a student performed in comparison to all other students who took that same test. And then a student's percentile rank is going to indicate that the student scored as well as or better than the percent of students in that group. So for example, think about this. A student scoring at the 35th percentile scored as well as or better than 35% of students in the group. You see how those are connected. However, it also means that 65% of students in the group exceeded this score or did better. Now, this percent is not the percentage of items the student answered correctly. It is the percent of kids that did better, worse, or the same as your child. So for instance, a child that's in the 80th percentile, right here, this blue person here, they score the same or better than as 80% of students. So they are at the front of 80% of the other kids who took the test. But that also means over here that 20% of students scored better than they did. So that can kind of help you understand where your child is relative to other kids who are the same age. Additionally, we can look at percentiles this way so we can see how they are distributed. So again, we have Romeo over here. He's in the 99th percentile. So he scored as well as or better than 99% of all students. That is amazing. Now, based upon our population, that means that that child scored better than 636 students. Next, we have Juliet. Juliet was in the 40th percentile, so that means she scored as well as or better than 40% of students. But that also means that 60% of students did better than Juliet. But on an exciting point of her, she did as well as or better than 257 students. So again, what is RIT? What is percentile? RIT score is that stable scale that tells you the one score for where your kid is, regardless of age. Percentile score is going to tell you how many kids that your child scored as well as or better than, as well as how many kids did better than your student. This is the chart that is vitally important, and I'll mention it again. I'm going to take a screenshot here, and then I will make sure that that is up in the post as well. But when you get your results from the academic reports we're going to be sending home, you can use this as a guide to help you know where most kids fall on the board. So if you get your child's RIT and percentile score back, and let's say that your child's RIT score is, let's say 210, and they're a 10th grader. If I come down here first to 10th grade, I can say, whoa, 210 is not on here. So that is okay, and that is perfectly normal when we take the map. What we're looking at is growth and looking at closing those gaps. So what I would do is keep going from right to left until I see 210 to see where the student is. So we're getting close here, and there we go. All right, so if my child was in 10th grade and got a 210, that means that your child is somewhere at the end of 5th grade to beginning of 6th grade in readiness for reading. But let's say their math, they got a 230. So I'd come up here to 10th grade and go, oh, 229, 231. Okay, so they're right on track in math based upon the mean RIT. Okay, and I would be looking at the mean part, because mean, we're just thinking average, right? That's all we're thinking right now as a parent group. So with that thought, that can help you understand what grade level your student is functioning in either math or reading. This is sometimes what's sent home, but again, just making sure that if you get these, only look at the middle number here for the RIT, and then only look at the middle number here for the percentile. They sort of give confidence ranges, but not needed as much when we're looking. We use the middle number to best understand those. And then over here, you can see how much they should grow, and then how much they did grow from the previous one. So what can you do as a parent? First, I would look at that chart and make sure I understood the level of my child's skill mastery, and understand what grade level that they are in. Next, I'm probably going to be looking at what they can do on their skill level that's not at their current grade level. So in that instance with the reading, where my 10th grade student would be at a 5th or 6th grade level, I might be going to Amazon and finding some additional books for them to read that are closer to their age range. I might grab some workbooks for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students in ELA and have them work on some of those workbooks. I can talk to my teacher about getting my student on Lexia, which is an additional program to help them out. Also, you can use Epic Books or any other kind of program that can help read and go through text with kids. Additionally, in math, same thing. You can find extra workbooks in 6th through 8th grade. You could schedule time for students to do IXL, which is another service we're provided. So again, here, the important part is that when you're looking to grow, sometimes the child needs to do things at their skill level and not just their current grade level. So again, if I had a 10th grade kid here, but they're functioning on a 4th grade level based upon these RIT, I might try to get some additional 4th to 5th grade workbooks to work on with my child, and know that we're doing many of those things in intervention right now as well. All right, I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to start the video back up after my next meeting to keep recording, and then we'll put them together for you guys. All right, thank you families and community members for joining us back. Part 2, we're going to wrap up with the ANET benchmark assessments and then talk about GPA and credits. So again, let's talk about what is the ANET interim benchmark assessments that we are using. So first, this is going to help us to better understand what students know and are able to do in relation to their Common Core standards for their grade level. So that means that students are going to get specific questions and tasks to just what is like the high level mastery for that grade level. So if I'm a 10th grade English ELA student, then I'm going to be getting the 10th grade mastery standards, and that's what I'm going to be assessed on. If I'm in Algebra 1, I'm going to get the mastery level standards for Algebra 1 students. And so you can see that how that is already different from the MAP assessment, as the questions are static. Every kid generally gets the same questions, and they are assessed on how they do compared to that mastery level for that grade. And the purpose of this, much like it's highlighted, is that it helps teachers and parents and students as well understand the standards that students have mastered and the ones that they are not. Now, we really get a good chunk of data back about these, both for the student and the school. And this data is going to help us better determine like the interventions and how to address and provide a scope and sequencing in our teaching that addresses all of the needs of our learners. So unlike the single tree look with MAP, this is really looking at that whole field again. So what we do is we generally look at previous growing seasons and tell us, how old those trees planted in 2018? Like, how tall should they be? If they're too short, do we need to increase water? How many main branches do they have? How many pounds of nuts are they yielding? And so we're looking at all these things to determine where that one tree or field of trees is relative to how they should be performing and how they should be doing if they are a high yield, high producing tree. And so this is the type of report that we generally look at for understanding student percentages. And so you may get this one. You may also just get the numbers. One thing to know about here is that when I look at this 42% for the student score, okay, which is the school score right here for the student, we're looking at 42% was the score, and 43% was the overall network. So right now, when you're looking at these graphs, I wouldn't judge it to 100%. I'm judging it to the gray of the network. So whether you're looking at the school or your individual student score, look at how far off or how far above we are from that network score. Because that is all the students in the achievement network. So the all schools across the United States that took that same test, that same English Language Arts 9 test, this English 1 course. Every student that took that across America, the average was 43%. So if we're looking at here, we're not far off from that mark, and so we are average with the rest of America towards mastery in those standards. Now, also, we look at some of the family reports, and you might be seeing some of these or have seen these in the past as well. You can see where we were and then where the network is as well. And so you can kind of see, like, in this specific standard, 100%, we got them all right. But most kids in most schools only get about 44% of that right. And then sometimes it'll tell you also on this report things that students need to do better. So for this one, this standard right here, and it tells you what the standard is down here. It says that the average network gets about 42% correct out of the 100% available, but for this student got a 0% available. So what do I need to do as a parent? First, ask the teacher for office hours and ensure that the student is attending. We often offer those before school starts in the morning. Some teachers have them throughout the day, as well as Friday mornings are a great place for those to take place. Ask the teacher if there's anything the student missed that they can make up. Ask the teacher if there's anything that they got a low grade on that they could redo. And that will help them work on those grade level standards as well. And I would just say, like, as a parent, and I have to do this with my elementary daughter as well, is just finding some time to set aside and saying, hey, for the next 30, 45 minutes, I need you to work on this one thing. This one thing. Work on this one missing assignment from your ELA class, and they get that done after 30, 45 minutes. Let them take a break, and then see, like, can you work for another 20, 30 minutes on a missing or low-graded math assignment. And doing that will help your child work more at that mastery grade level that they need to be working on. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to GPAs and credits. All right, so what is a GPA? You're going to see these on the transcripts, and you're going to see these on, report cards coming home. So GPA is your grade point average. So I think of this as like, this is kind of the standard way in America that we look at achievement, especially in middle school, high school, and in college. Essentially, what happens is for every course, you get a number of units or credits, depending on the content of that course. Now, in secondary school, which is high school, courses all carry the same number of units, but particularly in our BC courses and college courses, that can vary a lot based upon, do they have a lab, what level is it set at, how many more hours does it require, and etc. So the number of units can change. Generally, there is a connection with the letter grade. So if you get an A plus, and you'll get a 4 grade points for it, which generally ranges somewhere from 97 to 100 generally in the schools that you might be looking at. And then you can see how this goes down here. So if I look at the GPA and I go, well, my student got a 1.7, I know they're at a C minus for their GPA average as a student in high school. And that is a number that colleges do look at. And then furthermore, that jobs look at as you come out of college or come out of high school as well. And so these are very important because these are averages across all of your classes, not just one or not just the other one. So you also might notice that we have some students that have an above 4.0 GPA. And there are reasons for this because we have some students who are taking weighted GPA classes. So they're weighted because those classes are harder because they require more work. As well as college classes are often weighted more. So you'll often see that GPAs can go higher than 4.0 because of how GPAs are weighted. And listen, I know this is probably obvious, but great grades equal financial aid. And this report here has that every 10th of a point a student raises their high school GPA, that can save thousands of dollars in student loans that you don't have to pay back later. That's a 10th of a point, right? And so we're talking very small changes that can make a huge difference in the amount of money that you'll have for your post-secondary schooling. Additionally, a lot of colleges and universities offer full scholarships for great GPAs. However, know that they're not all for 4.0 students. A lot of colleges do award grants and funding for students that have those B averages as well. So this is a great way to remind yourself, hey, listen, maybe you can't hit that 4.0, but you can get to a 3.0 or a 3.5. So what's the target GPA? And I would say really this fluctuates sometimes from 2.5 and up, but I would say that ideally the healthy box to be in is at about a 3.0 and above. If you're at that 3.0 and above, you're great for Cal State. You're going to be great at some of the other universities and colleges around us. And it's going to help you, one, get entrance, but two, just show off everything you've been working hard at and doing. So let's switch over to credits. Now, credits are a way of measuring how many units or courses that a student has completed throughout high school. And there are thresholds as to how many credits you need for each of your degree or pathway tracks. Now, generally, high schools across the nation are 1 credit for 1 year and 0.5 credit for a semester course. But we know we are in California, and that is a little bit different. So 1-year courses receive 10 credits, and semester courses get to 5 credits. Bakersfield college classes are 10 credits per class, even though they are only half a year or a semester long. Now, just to note, we are a charter school, but we are a public school as well. And those requirements are the same for us. However, we have a little bit more elevated as we believe that we are a college prep academy in that early college model. So what does this mean? What do I need at WCPA for GPA and credits? So if you're currently in the ag prep track looking for your associates, you really need to hit the 3.0 GPA and above. You need to have 250 credits from WCPA. You need to have 60 BC credits. And note that some of your courses will overlap in both of these categories. If you're looking for your A through G in your high school diploma, you're looking more at a 2.0, 2.5 and above. as well as 250 WCPA credits. And this completion down here is more on an individual track. So what do I need to do as a parent? First, when you get report cards back, look for anything below a 70%. And then that's when I would set up a meeting with the teacher, potentially their counselor. If it's a BC course, maybe talking to their college support teacher, and as well as talking to the student about what might have happened over the course of that time that led to something being below 70%. Because if a student does not get the passing grade, they are not going to get the credits, and they have to accrue those credits every year to graduate on time. Also, if I have a student who only has one class that fell below that 70%, maybe try to help them give more time to that one class. Look at their schedule and how they're doing their work and when they're completing their work, and try to get them to spend more time on just the one class. Next, also, I would say if your child is behind, especially in credits, this is a great time to schedule a meeting with counselors to look at the graduation path and how close we are to getting them to being on track to graduate with all their peers and colleagues. All right, so at this point, that was the whole presentation. We're going to work on recording a Spanish version of this as well, and we are looking to be sending out information regarding your students' progress, hopefully over the next few days as well. All right, thanks everybody. I hope you have and enjoy your weekend, and I hope this was helpful and informative.